Glad you could join us again. Happy New Year to you. Welcome to Earth File. I'm Ayola Kasim. The year 2014 was eventful for the changing human relationship with the environment. Mass marches, international negotiations for the confirmation of climate science, local, national, and international struggles, more extreme weather, more disastrous impacts on the earth, from spills to air pollution to droughts to continued nuclear contamination from the Fukushima nuclear meltdown of 2011. All forced their way into our consciousness, into our public debate, into our growing awareness that many aspects of human production must change. The main events that shaped 2014 are our focus today on Earth File. Do stay with us. Scientists revealed that ocean acidification is increasing. The health of the oceans is threatened by overfishing, by massive accumulations of plastic, and by the pesticides runoff from agriculture, turning large areas into dead zones. Coral reefs, among the most biologically diverse and important resources, continue to die at increasing rates.
More broadly, our footprint on the planet is increasing, continues to rise. That means that we are cutting trees faster than they can regrow, we are catching fish faster than they can reproduce, we are emitting more CO2 than oceans and forests can absorb. So we are on a total unsustainable path. We know that very clearly now. We are overshooting, we are living beyond the planetary boundaries, and we have to change the trend.
The United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warned that the impacts of climate change are already serious. The latest report from the IPCC, the UN body tasked with presenting a sober scientifically based evaluation, continues to up the level of certainty about the reality of climate change, about the severity of the threats to humanity, and about the cause being human activity. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released the final draft of the synthesis report that caps the long road taken to produce its fifth assessment report, which has been released in chunks over the last year. The synthesis report pulls together the main points from the body of the massive report. The synthesis report wraps together highlights from the three earlier reports on climate science released in September 2013, potential climate impact, and the ways to adapt and reduce vulnerability, released in March 2014, and strategies to mitigate climate impacts, released in April 2014. It is the product of a sometimes contentious negotiating process over wording and emphasis, and draws on the work of more than 800 scientists. The report is designed to make state-of-the-art thinking about climate change available to policymakers and the public.
I think it's very clear that to avoid the chaos of runaway climate change, we know what we need to dramatically reduce global emissions of greenhouse gases. And I think we need to lead to a future that has much lower intensity in the use of those activities that contribute to emissions of greenhouse gases. It also projects the risks and the expensive and often unquantifiable and destabilizing impacts of a high carbon path of development and growth. While the IPCC does not make any recommendations, policymakers, I'm sure, will benefit greatly from seeing the implications of the two alternative development pathways side by side.
The big picture, of course, is one in which Earth's atmosphere and oceans have clearly warmed, with consequences for the hydrologic cycle, the planet's icy regions, and some weather extremes. Statistically speaking, the IPCC report estimates with at least 95% confidence that more than half of this warming is due to human activities. The implications for the future are serious. Continued emission of greenhouse gases will cause further warming and long-lasting changes in all components of the climate system, increasing the likelihood of severe, pervasive, and irreversible impacts for people and ecosystems.
Global mean sea level will continue to rise during the 21st, and global glacier volume will also shrink further. There will be impacts on food and water, increased poverty, increased displacement of people, and coastal flooding. Now, as it happens, the window of action is really closing very rapidly. So we have a very short window of opportunity. If you look at the total carbon budget to ensure that temperature increase by the end of this century will not exceed 2 degrees Celsius, we've already used up a substantial share of this. What's remaining for us is only 275 gigatons of carbon. So this clearly shows that we have a very limited window of opportunity, and I think the global community must look at these numbers and show the resolve by which we can bring about change.
In one of the most significant developments for forest monitoring since the launch of Landsat more than 40 years ago, the World Resources Institute in February unveiled the Global Forest Watch, an online platform that maps a wealth of forest data. Critically, Global Forest Watch extends a near real-time deforestation alert system worldwide, enabling authorities and environmentalists to potentially take action on large-scale forest clearing as it occurs. Global Forest Watch also aggregates data on concessions, fires, and agricultural sustainability in an effort to guide future agricultural expansion away from wildlife-rich and carbon-dense forests.
50 to 90% of the logging in several developing countries is likely and deemed to be illegal. And we believe that the sheer scale of illegal logging is equivalent to 10 to 30% of the global trade, or between 30 and $100 billion annually. This covers different areas. With forest crime, it includes both the illegal trade in endangered and very rare species such as rosewood and sandalwood, like from East Africa, and mahogany from many different parts of the world. It also includes what most people consider with illegal logging, timber, but more importantly, it also includes elements of organized crime involved in the pulp and paper industry. The common denominator for these is that they involved advanced laundering methods, harvesting illegal wood, mixing it with legal wood, and we're talking in the scales of millions of truckloads annually. In terms of paper and pulp, most of the illegal imports of tropical wood to the EU and the US comes in the form of exactly this, paper and pulp. 62 to 86% are believed to originate through paper and pulp. The fourth and rapidly growing form of forest crime involved the unregulated and partly illicit trade in charcoal. This is also causing major loss of revenues to governments. In Africa alone, we believe that governments are losing revenues for at least $1.9 billion a year. Secondly, we also believe that due to the involvement of organized crime in the entire charcoal trade, we believe that people organized in this are probably making even more than the government would from revenues in the scale of $2 to $9 billion a year. This is equivalent up to 3 times the value of the drug trade in Africa.
In 2014, the poaching crisis continued largely unabated in Africa and afar. A remarkable study this year estimated that Africa lost a fifth of its elephants from 2010 to 2012, leaving a total of 100,000 elephants dead. There were a few bright spots, however. A number of countries burnt their ivory, including China, and rhino horn stockpiles. The United States government introduced new measures to help tackle the crisis. The illegal wildlife trade, which impacts far more species than elephants and rhinos, is estimated at $19 billion and has been linked to other illicit activities such as terrorism, drug trade, weapon trafficking, and human trafficking.
Environmental crime has implications well beyond the traditional conservation and environmental response. It links into livelihoods, it links into national economies, because the magnitude of money that is being lost to local communities, to the national treasury, and to the national economy is so significant in its direct impact that it actually has consequences, registering on an economic Richter scale.
The reason why nothing is, or too little is being done, is not due to corruption or the involvement of state actors, but due to the fact that resources are not being invested into the enforcement chain and to significant civilian efforts to combat this. We do not ask for drones. We don't need drones. We need enforcement officers, investigators, prosecutors, as well as civilian efforts, actually to have resources to address this. 3 years ago, the international effort against illegal logging from an enforcement perspective was zero.
Countries have already passed quite a number of national policies and legislations related to different parts of the story that is being told here. We also have a number of international instruments, Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. A premier responsibility, particularly for the aspects of crime, is the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. But also institutions such as Interpol, the World Customs Organization, ITTO, but also the Food and Agriculture Organization. All of us have a part of the responsibility or the mandate to address issues that relate to these phenomena described here. We need to get at national level and at international level a greater commitment to have a joined up response strategy, which may begin with further tightening legislation, which may also have to do with a great